The moment I stepped into the office that morning, I knew the weight of 15 years of dedication, late nights, and relentless effort suddenly felt like a noose tightening around my throat. My boss, Mr. Whitmore, barely made eye contact. The entire floor was quieter than usual, and an uneasy tension clung to the air like a storm waiting to break. Then he called me in. "Amelia, can I see you for a moment?" I had seen this coming long before they did. What they did not know was that I had already made my move. They had no idea what was about to hit them. I took a deep breath and stepped into Mr. Whitmore's office. The walls, once a comforting shade of beige, felt suffocating. Framed awards and certificates adorned the space, many of which I had helped the company earn. The irony was not lost on me. Mr. Whitmore gestured toward the chair across from his desk. I sat down, smoothing my skirt, maintaining a composed expression. Despite the storm brewing inside me, he cleared his throat. "Amelia, I want to start by saying how much we appreciate your dedication to the company." There it was, the obligatory sugarcoating before the knife. I nodded but said nothing. I had rehearsed this moment in my head too many times to count. We have been reviewing our operational strategy, and unfortunately, we are making some difficult decisions. Given recent changes, we have decided to move in a different direction. Your role has been reevaluated. I tilted my head slightly. "You are letting me go." His lips pressed into a thin line. "It is not personal. Amelia, this is a restructuring." I held up a hand, stopping his pre-written speech. "Mr. Whitmore, let us not waste time pretending I have known this was coming for weeks." His brows furrowed, but I continued before he could respond. I could see the shifts. The meetings I was excluded from, the projects reassigned, the sudden vague performance reviews. You and the others may think you blindsided me, but I am always prepared. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face, and for the first time he looked slightly unnerved. "Amelia, I leaned forward, clasping my hands together. "Before you continue, let me make one thing clear. I did not sit idly by and wait for this moment. You may be letting me go, but I have already assured that I will land on my feet." His fingers tapped against the desk. "What exactly are you saying?" I smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "Let us just say you and the company are in for quite the surprise." He swallowed, the confidence he had walked in with starting to crack, and that was exactly what I wanted. Mr. Whitmore shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his fingers drumming against the polished mahogany desk. The confidence he had just moments ago was beginning to wane, and I relished the subtle panic in his eyes. "Amelia," he said carefully, his tone measured. "If you have something to say, I suggest you be clear about it." I exhaled slowly, leaning back in my chair as I crossed one leg over the other. "I have spent 15 years building this company." I said. "I have given it my time, my ideas, and my loyalty, and in return, I get a dismissal speech disguised as a strategic decision." I tilted my head. "It is insulting, really." He opened his mouth, but I continued. "So I planned ahead while you and the board were quietly phasing me out. I was making my own arrangements." "Did you think I would just walk away with nothing?" His eyes narrowed. "What are you implying?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a neatly organized folder, placing it on his desk with deliberate care. "This is what I am implying." He hesitated before picking it up and flipping through the pages. With each passing second, the color drained from his face. "These are..." He stopped, inhaling sharply. "Company data, financial reports, internal communications, all perfectly legal." Of course, I added before he could accuse me of wrongdoing. "I only access what I had clearance for." But what I found, I leaned in. "Lowering my voice is quite damning." He snapped the folder shut. "This is confidential information, and yet it is filled with discrepancies." I countered. "Misallocated funds, overstated profits, dubious partnerships." Shall I go on? His jaw clenched. "You have no idea what you are meddling with." "Oh, but I do," I said with a smirk. "You see, while you were planning my exit, I was ensuring that if I went down, I would not be going alone for the first time since I walked into the office." Mr. Whitmore looked truly unsettled. His confidence had shattered, replaced by something that looked dangerously close to fear. I stood up, straightening my blouse. "I am giving you a choice. I said either you compensate me fairly for my departure, severance benefits, and an airtight letter of recommendation, or this information finds its way to the right people, the authorities, the media investors. His grip tightened around the folder. You are blackmailing me. I smiled. I prefer to call it leverage silence, stretched between us. Finally, he exhaled and ran a hand through his graying hair. Give me some time. I nodded. You have 24 hours with that. I turned and walked out of his office, leaving him with his thoughts and his crumbling empire. I had seen this day coming. What he did not realize was that it had arrived on my terms. The next 24 hours passed in a slow, tense haze. I spent most of it at home, keeping a close eye on my emails and messages. Mr. Whitmore had not responded yet, but I knew he would. He had no choice by noon the next day. My phone buzzed a message. Mage Whitmore, meet me in my office. We need to talk. A smirk played on my lips. I had him exactly where I wanted when I arrived. His office was eerily quiet. The blinds were drawn, casting long shadows across his desk. He looked worse than the day before. His tie was loosened, and a slight sheen of sweat glistened on his forehead. I sat down without waiting for an invitation. I assume you have an answer for me. His fingers tapped restlessly against the desk before he exhaled sharply. You win. The words were bitter on his tongue. I could see it in his expression. He despised admitting defeat, but he knew the alternative was far worse. I have arranged for a severance package. He continued, sliding a document across the desk. 6-month salary, full benefits, and a signed letter of recommendation. I picked up the paper, scanning it carefully. Make it a year's salary, I said without looking up. His jaw clenched. That is, you can afford it. I interrupted, considering how much money has been siphoned off in creative accounting. I met his gaze unflinching 1 year. Or I make a few calls. A muscle in his cheek twitched, but after a long moment he sighed and pulled another sheet from his drawer. Fine. 1 year. I watched as he amended the contract, his pen pressing hard enough to nearly tear the paper. He slid it back to me and I carefully examined every word before signing. I leaned back in my chair. I have to admit, I thought you would put up more of a fight. Whitmore exhaled, rubbing his temples. You think you are the first person to back me into a corner? He let out a humorless chuckle. You are just the first to do it so effectively. I shrugged. 15 years in this company taught me how to play the game. You should have seen this coming. A tense silence stretched between us before he finally spoke. What are you going to do now? I smiled, slipping the signed agreement into my bag. That is the best part, I said as I stood up. You will find out soon enough. With that, I turned and walked out of his office for the last time, leaving behind 15 years of service, a shattered illusion of loyalty, and a man who had just realized he had underestimated me. As I stepped out of the building for the last time, the crisp afternoon air filled my lungs. The weight that had clung to me for years lifted with every step I took away from the glass doors of Whitmore and Company. I was free. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A call. I glanced at the screen and smiled before answering. Is it done? The voice on the other end asked. Yes, I said, my tone. Comba victorious, it is done good. The voice replied. We are ready whenever you are. I looked up at the towering corporate building one last time, knowing that inside Whitmore was likely still sitting at his desk, wondering how he had lost control so quickly. But this was never just about revenge. It was about control, about proving that I was never just another disposable employee. I had already set my next plan in motion. While Whitmore had been scrambling to cover his tracks, I had been securing my own future. My resignation was not just an exit, it was an entrance into something bigger. I had spent the last 6 months quietly assembling a team, securing funding, and preparing to launch my own consulting firm. And the best part, some of Whitmore's most valuable clients were already interested. They had seen my work, they had trusted me for years, and now they were more than willing to follow me. As I hailed a cab, I allowed myself one last look at the past, then I let it go. The game had changed, and this time I was the one calling the shots for